Hey everyone, this is Matt Wakeling and you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. Thanks so much for joining me for episode number 147. Now, 2020 has been a crazy year on so many levels, but one thing that occurs this year is the 70th birthday of the Fender Telecaster. So in 1950, Leo Fender released the Broadcaster, which quickly was renamed the Tele after some legal complaints from Gretsch. But Fender released the guitar and it became the first commercially available solid body electric guitar. Now this was after a pretty tense arms race with Les Paul and some other competitors. But as we know, music and popular culture was forever changed. Now in episode number 121 of the podcast, I get stuck right into the history of the instrument with Ian Port, and that's a great episode. So for a lot of information about that race for the first solid electric, check out that episode, there'll be a link in the notes. But for today, I'm joined by three diverse Telecaster wranglers to discuss this iconic instrument, its strengths, its quirks, longevity, and its legacy. Dr. Zane Banks is a Sydney-based guitarist who blazes on his 50s reissue Tele in the Banks Brothers, and the excerpts we hear in this podcast today are Zane playing hot-rodded rockabilly in his band Cruisin Deuces. It is face-melting stuff. So all the hot licks, that's Zane. Shane Diiorio hosts the hugely popular YouTube channel In the Blues. As a gear reviewer, he has intimately played a legion of guitars, but his go-to axe is always a Tele. And my third guest is Brian Wampler, who creates the world-class Wampler pedals seen on pedal boards all around the globe. He's not only a huge Tele fan and player, Brian has worked with two of the world's most beloved Tele players in Brad Paisley and Brett Mason to create their signature Wampler pedals. All right, let's jump straight into this Tele celebration. First up, we've got Zane Banks. Dr. Zane Banks, welcome back to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you back. Now, Telecasters, that's I thought this would be right up your alley, knowing you're one of Australia's Telemasters in my and many other opinions. Zane, the Tele turns 70 this year. Why do you think this design has endured for so long?
I think in one word, it's simplicity. It's just such a simple design. There's hardly any moving parts. And it really came out of that mid-century post-war explosion where you've got the space race and all of the design. You got Frank Lloyd Wright sort of doing all these things with architecture and all of the American cars that were being built and just sort of what we think of as modern living, television and that stuff. The Telecaster came out of that boom. And a lot of those other things, like the Saturn V rocket that took, people to the moon, are very complicated. But a Telecaster is essentially just a plank of wood with a baseball bat, and that's it. It's very simple, and it works. And it really hasn't changed that much since. It's very straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I say this all the time. I'll probably edit this out. I say this to anyone I talk to vintage guitars about. I'm always knocked out how much the designs. Yeah, by 1959, how locked in the guitar designs were.
Totally.
For today, for what we're playing today still.
And what's really interesting, if you compare it to the cars of the age, I really like sort of 50s American cars. But if you look at, say, a 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, it's the one with the fins and the white wall tires. And then you go and look at a 1989 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, and it just looks like a Holden Commodore. It's gone from being this thing that's about 180 feet long and 6 meters wide, and just looking like the embodiment of sort of space age modernism. And then by the 80s, it just looks like a standard family suburban car. Whereas by the 80s, the Telecaster still looked like a Telecaster. Some guys put a Floyd Rose on it. The colors had changed, but they're just superficial things. The shape of it was the same. The headstock never really changed, unlike Strats that had the sort of large headstocks and. Yeah, they kept it pretty much what it was.
Locked it in. What are some of the genius aspects of the design that appeal to you as a player?
For me, it just feels right. So you know how there are like most people I know who are sort of serious guitar players, there'll be a guitar that just really resonates with their physicality. You know, Slash has a Les Paul, like it's his guitar. And I find that there's just something about the contours, the shape, and the weight of a Telecaster. Like, it's just me. And that's not to say that I can't enjoy a Strat or a Les Paul or anything. But the minute I got a Telecaster when I was, I don't know, like 14 or something, I was like, yep, this is the guitar. So there's that I think is really good. And as for the design, I like the fact that it's so straightforward. You know, I find sometimes Les Pauls with the 4 sort of, you know, tone knobs and the volume knobs. And, you know, I've got glasses. My eyesight's not great. If I'm on stage and the lighting is a bit off, I can get confused, particularly if I'm singing, you know, looking down like, oh, I just turned my volume off. Didn't mean to do that. Whereas with a Tele, like, I just know where everything is. You got 3 pickup configurations. Most of the time I'm just on the back pickup. I've got a tone knob that I don't muck around with much. I just roll it off slightly. And have a volume. And I just like the fact it's like a standard sort of, you know, 3-speed Ford pickup truck. Like, you can leave it in the paddock. It can cop a beating. If it falls over on stage, I'm not precious. Whereas if my Les Paul's on stage, it's like I'm leaving a diamond necklace up there. Like, oh, don't touch it. You know, it's got a through neck and it's got an angled headstock. Whereas a Tele, it's like it's just bolted on. Like, it's fine.
It's great, man. Were there any shortcomings in the design? I guess we'll start talking about your Teles in a moment. Are there any areas where you've maybe mixed things up on your own instruments or?
Look, I've played a handful of Teles from about 1950 through to 1955, and I haven't had any issues with them. I think the ones that they made in that sort of first 5-year period, maybe up to say like 56, are just perfect. And a lot of that had to do with the materials that were being used, the build quality, and Fender just had such a small shop at the time. So like everything was hand wound, amps, you know, point to point. These days, the quality of Fender guitars is still fantastic, but if you want that early 50s thing, you're looking at like master-built custom shop because of just the attention to detail. The thing that I found is just a comfort thing. If you look at a standard Telecaster bridge plate, it has what's called an ashtray bridge, where there are walls on 3 sides. And I find that for chicken picking, which is what I do a lot of the time, the walls on the side, particularly on the side that would be like closest to my chin, near the low E string, starts to dig into my palm. So I actually had it replaced, and I've got what's called a non-ashtray bridge plate. So it's a very, very minor thing. It doesn't affect the tone. It just means that when I put the fleshy palm of my thumb on my right hand on the guitar, I don't sort of get this, you know, bit of metal sticking into it, and just, it doesn't hurt. It's just irritating.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the main thing. Yeah, like I don't think there's nothing wrong with the pickups on those early Fenders because, you know, they're like hand wound pickups. They're so hot. Like I did a gig a couple of years ago and a friend brought down a pair of 55 Teles, like original ones. And it's just something about, I mean, you probably found it too with vintage guitars. There's just something about the materials and the way they were put together for electric guitars in the 50s and obviously like acoustic guitars in like the 30s that is sort of hard to replicate, you know, a certain je ne sais quoi, I suppose. And I find sometimes standard Fender stock pickups these days don't have that same oomph or the beef that I want to get. It can be a little bit thin, particularly on the back pickup. So that's why a lot of guys obviously replace them. They've got custom shop pickups, or they'll go for like the hand wound option. And that would be the only thing that I would want to test. If I was going to play like a standard Fender USA Tele these days, it's the pickups more than anything else that I'd probably be checking out to see if I could get it as close to, I mean, my ideal Tele is like a 53 Tele, 53 Butterscotch. I think that's the year that they kind of really worked out what was needed in a Telecaster.
Awesome, man. Tell me about your Tele. We spoke about it in our longer interview, but I see you with a 50 style Tele on most of your gigs.
I just have like a 50 style, I think it's like a 52 custom shop Telecaster I've had for about 6 years now. And the only modifications that I've done, I think I've done 3. The tuners I took off, because I find like I play my Telecaster up to about like 80 hours a week, and before COVID it was getting gigged and toured pretty hard, and the tuners just kind of gave out. They weren't holding, so I replaced them with like Goto sort of vintage Cruisin style tuners that have the the Jeff Beck kind of wheel that locks on the back,
the locking ones. Yep.
And they're great, but again, like I might have to replace those because I've had them in there for a couple of years, and there's just one or two sort of tuning pegs that's slipping slightly from just being knocked over at a gig or colliding with an amp or being on an aeroplane. I had the ashtray bridge plate replaced, and I've had my pickups replaced, and I've put in Joe Barden, not to be confused with the former Vice President Joe Biden, but Joe Barden signature model pickups that were made for Danny Gatton, who's one of my favorite Telecaster players. And they're hot rails, which is quite interesting. A lot of people think, oh, you've got hot rail pickups in a Telecaster. But the thing I love about them is they just sound, at least in my mind, the way a Telecaster should. When you go on that back pickup, you want it to cut through and have that really bright Telecaster sound, but you don't want it to be like nails or anything, which sometimes I find a Telecaster can be just too trebly. So it's got beef and low end, which is really high output, and it's super clean. You could plug into a JCM 900 on 10 and it wouldn't hum at all. And I just love that about them. So I think I've found my sort of ideal Telecaster pickups, unless of course I somehow miraculously end up with an original 1950s Telecaster, and then I would settle for those pickups.
Okay. Nice. Do you have any other Teles in your collection?
I have two. I've got the one that I had when I was a kid, which is a Mexican Nashville Deluxe Telecaster.
Oh, okay. So the extra pickup.
It's got the extra pickup. It's a fantastic guitar, and the reason I sort of swapped is I just played that so much. Like I must have put, I don't know, like 15,000 hours or something on that guitar. The frets had been replaced and then ground down and then replaced and ground down. And it just needed so much work for a guitar that was, I'm guessing, like $800, $900 that I thought, well, if I was going to spend like $450 US on the pickups that I was talking about, and then I was going to get another, refret, and then I was going to look at replacing the bridge plate, it was going to be, like $1,800 for that. So I just thought, look, I might as well just save up and then get my dream sort of butterscotch early 50s Tele and then do those altercations. And so I've got, the Nashville Tele just as a backup, and I play it from time to time. It would still need a little bit of work if I was going to gig it, but it's perfectly good as a house guitar. And there's a lot of memories on that guitar as well.
Yeah, I bet. That's cool. Nice. You mentioned Danny Gatton. Are there any other Tele players who blew your mind?
I would say probably the two biggest influences when it comes to like Telecaster players would be the immortal Danny Gatton, the Humbler as he's known, and just Brent Mason. I think Brent Mason is such a phenomenal guitar player who plays a Telecaster. Fender's just brought out a signature model of his Telecaster. Yeah,
that looks cool.
Which I'm looking forward to. I'm heading into Fender on Friday, so hopefully there might be one down there that I can have a little bit of a play on.
Nice.
But Brent, basically just created that modern country sound, and isn't just limited to country playing. He's a fantastic jazz player and western swing. But listening to those two growing up, particularly as a teenager, was just, wow. I went from listening to a lot of rock players, and then I sort of got a Joe Pass record, a Danny Gatton record, and a Brent Mason one, and it kind of shaped the trajectory that I was on.
Yeah, wow. That's a nice trio of players right there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very linear kind of...
Yeah, exactly. And, between them, they kind of cover a very, very broad spectrum of, like, American popular music. Last year, Fender had a custom shop night that they were doing, and they got Jai and I to, I guess, do a showcase performance. And it was fantastic. We went down there, and they had this whole convention center just set up with custom shop guitars, and all of the dealers in the Australasian region were there, and they were sort of placing orders and bidding on like one-off custom shops.
Wow.
So there would have been, I don't know, like 500 master-built custom shop guitars. It was like being in a candy store.
Yeah.
And an entire wall was just the 70th anniversary Fender Telecaster and Broadcaster. They got the license from Gretsch to use Broadcaster again for the first time in 70 years. And it was fantastic just going through and getting the rundown from the Fender guys. It's like, well, this is modeled on, from March 1950 to April, they did this spec, and you could get them in different sort of relic stages. And, I brought my Telecaster with me, but I was like, why would I play this when I could play any guitar here? And they're like, $10,000 ones. So I just spent the entire time playing. I'm going to play one set on this guitar, and I'd get that one off and play it. So that was a 70th anniversary Broadcaster, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wow, I really want to play the sort of master-built 1953 Telecaster, which is one of 6 guitars. I play a set on that. And it was fantastic. And just seeing the subtle differences. It's the only time I've ever had, replicas of guitars covering like the entire spectrum of like the early 50s from up to I think about 55, 56, and just feeling the difference in like, oh, like this one has a slightly thicker neck and this one's more of like a scooped out C shape, and these pickups are a little bit hotter, and the original Broadcasters I think only had 2 pickup options, and they had like a bass cut, so you'd have the back pickup, and then the middle selector on the Telecaster, I think, was the neck pickup. And then if you went to what we would use as a neck pickup, that was like a bass boost for jazz playing.
Okay, wow.
So it's really weird when you like switch all the way forward, and it's like it would be a tone cut. The tone cuts out completely on the guitar. But it was really, really interesting playing through all of those and seeing this guitar that at the time was really maligned. Like in 1950, when Leo took it to the NAMM convention, he got slammed by all of the different merchants there who said like it's only thing it's good for is a canoe paddle. And
yeah.
At the time you've got beautiful Gibson guitars and Gretsch guitars, and then the Telecaster, like it's the working class guitar. It's so simple. But at the time, I think if you'd been used to playing like an L5 or, one of those big jazz boxes, people would have just gone like, what is this? It's ugly.
Yeah. And yet here we are, 70 years later, celebrating this amazing guitar.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'll see you in another 70 years.
Yeah, man. We'll do this again. I reckon we'll still be playing them, or someone will be. Our grandkids will be.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's become an icon now. I think the Telecaster, the Strat, and the Les Paul have really transcended just being guitars, and they're up there with symbols of like American culture, as much as you would think of like Mickey Mouse or the Coca-Cola sign or any of those things that you think of as sort of post-war American sort of invention and entrepreneurs, and the Telecaster is one of them, and it's certainly like one of the universal symbols of country music, as much as say a Stetson hat.
Shane from In the Blues, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Mate, thank you for joining me. When I was putting together this Telecaster special, I thought of you because when I think of your channel, I mostly think of you wailing away on your butterscotch Tele, and so I know you're familiar with the space we're talking about.
Yeah, as I know that people can't see this, but I got 3 Telecasters behind me right now on the webcam. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Teles, and I always like their simplicity and just the way they feel to play. To be honest, it's great.
Great, man. So 70 years on, why do you think the Telecaster design has still endured? And as you said, there's three different kind of flavors right behind you that I can see as well, but they're all Teles. What's kept this design in the player's focus for so long?
I actually think they have a bit more character than a Strat overall. A lot of Strats tend to sound very similar to my ear. I've tried and owned many Strats over the years, and for some reason, the Telecaster just has a completely different voicing, and there's less people, I think, playing Teles, especially in the blues scene, than playing Strats. So I hear Strats a lot, and then I hear Telecasters, and they really jump out of the mix. I think one of the reasons why they continue to do well is the fact that not only guys from country play them, but blues, John Five, the metal guys will play them, and they just suit so many different styles, and they've got so much attitude, especially on that bridge pickup. I know when I first heard a Telecaster, I always used to think of sort of nails down the chalkboard kind of thing, like on the bridge pickup. But then you realize, man, these things can totally rock. I know B.B. King played one before he went over to Gibson. I know some Led Zeppelin stuff was recorded, I think, on Telecasters back in the early days too. So they can cover pretty much anything sonically, even though they probably have that country stigma, which isn't a bad thing anyway. But they do so much really, really well. They got the best of the Strat when it comes to that neck pickup. You can get the best of the funk tones in the middle position, both pickups, and then bridge can do whatever you want it to do. And that's one of the things I always loved about it. Get on that bridge pickup, throw on a bit of dirt, and it totally rocks.
Yeah, man, absolutely. What do you think are some of the genius aspects of Leo Fender's design that we still use today?
I think it's just the simplicity, and that's what I love about it. I love the fact if I travel, I can unbolt the neck, throw it in my suitcase, get to where I'm going, bolt it back together, and it works. You don't have to worry about it. And I've done that before too, which is pretty funny. But I just love its simplicity. There's something I used to always hate that single coil buzz, but in the heat of the moment, it sort of helps. Not helps, but I think the tone of that, the raunchiness of the tone just really stands out in the mix. And it's just something that I hear Telecasters do so well. They've got a steely overtone to them. And I've always just liked their vibe when it comes to, hearing them played live. But I just think it's that traditionally like a 3-position toggle switch, 2 pickups, lots of different tones, and I think that's what's kept them going, and they look cool too. Plus, like I said before, they're more unique than just seeing another Strat on stage, in my opinion.
Sure. Were there any shortcomings in that original design that you've addressed yourself in your own guitars, or you've seen other manufacturers try and pull off?
So the thing I like least about most Telecasters is their input jack. That's the first thing to get replaced if it becomes loose.
Yeah.
And I also think the buzz can be a problem. And some underwound pickups can also be a problem. So I've ended up changing. I've got one Telecaster. The way I purchased it was the way it stayed. One of my others, my 52 reissue, I've modded and I've put like noiseless pickups in there because, there's venues that we used to play at that used to be unbearably buzzy. And the Joe Barton, Danny Gatton pickups were just like the best of the single coil tone, but without the buzz. So for me, that was like that can be an upgrade that can make a huge difference to people too. I know Fender do noiseless pickups and all those type of things, but I've never actually owned a set in the Telecasters. But I think the biggest downsides of the Tele would be the buzz for some people, no doubt about it. That input jack is terrible. Also, the little black cap thing that sits on top of the switch, that's forever falling off. I've super glued all of mine on now because I've lost them. It's just like, where did it go? Like you just go over to bridge pickup and it's gone forever. Yeah. So that. And also I think for some people, the weight can be an issue too, with traditional sort of Fender Teles at least anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That switch, it's funny seeing all the different solutions people have come up with over the years, like reversing the plate or bending the switch or whatever. But very cool. You mentioned your Tele. So, like I said earlier, the main Tele I associate you with is that butterscotch one with the Joe Bardens, which you've used on so many of your videos. It always sounds great.
Excellent.
Can you talk us through your Tele collection?
So that particular Telecaster I purchased when I did a trip over to San Francisco. I stayed there for probably 2 or 3 months at one point in the US, and I was in San Fran for a couple of months, and I needed a guitar, and I found that, and it was like the first time I really, really wanted a Telecaster. The only lefty I'd seen before that one that was in every shop was either, a Squire one at the low end sort of budget guitar, or, a Mexican Standard, which I didn't really, for a lefty, there was only one type. It was always the Sunburst one. I saw that it had a fatter neck than I was used to sort of playing, and it sounded really nice. Like, it was a pretty good guitar stock, but I played it to death, and the upgrades were out of necessity more than anything else. And the pickups, like I said before, the buzz was a bit uncontrollable where I was actually playing live. If I was playing at home, it would have been fine, but for the live stuff we were doing, I couldn't handle. It was a distraction, so that's why I changed the pickups. And I played that guitar pretty much nonstop for about 5 years, and then ended up having to have the frets replaced as well. So over the years, I ended up modding it, and it's become this like weird, sort of like my number one Tele in many ways. But it's really unique now, as opposed to just being an off-the-shelf model. I used to get a lot of complaints, people saying, "Oh, how come you've butchered your Telecaster and put these hot rails in there?" I'm like, they're not hot rails, man. They're super low output, noiseless pickups from, the Danny Gatton, Joe Barden pickups. So, yeah, that guitar has been around the world. It's been used to death. It's been played to death. It's beat up. It's all natural kind of reliquing, and that's probably. I always say if I have to keep one, I'll keep that. It's got a bit of a sentimental attachment, but I love playing it too. I think Boxing Day last year, I ended up purchasing one of the American original Fender Telecasters, which is essentially visually the same thing, except it's got a really fat neck, and the pickups sounded fantastic straight out of the box or whatever. Like, the whole thing was great. That's the first time I've picked up a guitar in a while, at least anyway, where it played perfectly off the shelf. I've done nothing to it. I took it home, and it was fantastic. And it was a point of difference to the one with the Joe Barden Danny Gatton pickups, even though they look essentially the same. Mm-hmm. It's great having a traditional single coil Tele, and they're pretty much like the two, Fender ones that I've got. Recently I had Kiesel, they sent out a beautiful custom Telecaster T-style guitar that ticked all the boxes in terms of what I like, and that Kiesel is loaded with the Johnny Hyland pickups. He's one of my favorite players.
Oh wow! Cool.
Just because Johnny Hyland, man, he can do everything really, really well, and that's a non-traditional Tele. It's a T-style, what they would call a Telecaster style electric guitar, but it has 3 pickups, but it also allows you to get the neck and bridge combination or middle on its own, which is great. It's not wide like a Strat. So Johnny Hyland's got. I've had like 3 sets of his pickups over the last 20 years, but these pickups, man, they're by far my favorite out of all of the ones of his that I've tried over the years. And that guitar is super light. It's just a beautiful white color. It just looks really cool. And yeah, being that it's about a third lighter than my Fender Telecasters, it's getting used a lot. Nice. And the last one is the Vola Vasti, which is from a company I didn't know anything about until earlier this year. And they make great made in Japan electric guitars. And the Vasti has this like passive boost thing in the bridge. So my rationale for having multiple guitars that are similar is that they're all different, even if visually to the untrained eye, they all kind of look the same. They're all different now, which is something I don't try and just double up because of, I'll always pick one over the other. So, each of these is different and unique enough now to be used for different things. And today I didn't use all 3 of the ones that you can see behind me. I know everyone else can't, but I used 2 of them, and it was cool. They've all got their own vibe, and I can't complain.
Very cool, man. Yeah, that Vola looks awesome as well. I only heard of these through your show. I think you mentioned them on your podcast, so I checked them out, and they look great.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that first unboxing reaction video I did of one of their other guitars, I was stunned at how great they were. Those first reaction videos are legit. Like, I unbox them sometimes on camera just to, give people my first impressions, and they're up there with anything that's way, way more expensive. They're They're kind of like what used to be the deluxe series of guitars from Fender, but
Okay.
made in Japan, and attention to details. They're beautiful instruments. They're just a little bit different visually too. So if you want a straight up Telecaster clone or a Strat clone, they're not for you. But for folks who don't mind something that looks a little bit different, then you'll probably get a kick out of them. They got more of a, I guess, a modern look to them.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned Johnny Highland. Were there any other Tele players who turned you onto the instrument or just excited you as a musician in general?
Yeah, Brad Paisley, like I don't, I got this dirty secret that I kind of like some of that commercial country music. And I love like Southern rock and all that kind of stuff too. Yep. So there's plenty of players throughout that. But I think, one of my good friends, Dr. Rick, who has been on my channel, and we gigged together for, I don't know, like 8 years or something. He was right into Telecasters, and that opened my mind to him more than any, household name musician or guys that are on my wall. Like hearing him play one, I went, oh, now I kind of get it. And one of my other friends, Brian Strafford as well, who's like, he's a monster. He's an absolute monster guitar player. So I got a lot of much better players than me in my friend circle. And yeah, hearing them play Teles was, I think, the initial inspiration for it. But I think my favorite Tele tone and player for straight up sort of country stuff would be Brad Paisley. I love what he does. I mean, I know there's blues guys that play them as well, but yeah, that kind of sound is pretty cool. He's got a great tone and great feel, and yeah, just those country guys. I can't play like that or really do any of that kind of stuff, but I can still appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's a monster. He's a monster.
Yeah,
and,
he is.
Brian Wampler is also in this episode today, and he's obviously worked really closely with him as well. So big fan. So nice to see. Paisley get a couple of mentions. Funny you mentioned about the Joe Barden pickups. Zane Banks, the Sydney guitarist, who is also featured here. He's got Bardens in his 50s reissue Tele.
Very cool.
He said almost the same thing as you. People say, "Why have you got the hot wires and the hot rails rather?" And, same story. So yeah,
it's like no one knows who Danny Gatton is. Like it's like just look at any video of him playing, or most videos of him playing back in the day. He's using them. So yeah. I mean, I know Greg Koch also had similar style pickups in one of his guitars. I'm not sure if he used Joe Barton's or not from memory, but there's another great Telecaster player. I mean, I know he plays a lot of other instruments now, but man, what a freak. That guy's great.
Absolutely, yeah. Have you seen his Reverend signature? It's like an oversized Tele because he's such a tall bloke. That's
I met Greg a few years back. And
oh, really?
I'd also been lucky enough to meet a couple of the NBA legends from like the Lakers back in the day and stuff. This was just by chance, but I was like, this Greg is huge. Even my recollection of some of those NBA guys, he's got to be close to 6'10", because I don't know how tall he actually is, but I remember just standing next to him, I'm like, far out, man. You don't look that big in the videos. But yeah, he's a monster. He's a great player, great dude, and yeah, he's got just crazy great chops, and yeah, his Reverend guitar, I didn't realize it was larger. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, just a little bit. I played one last year, yeah. And it felt really good. It didn't feel like a giant guitar. It just felt good. Just sat nicely.
Cool.
But yeah, great guitar. Hey, thanks Shane so much for talking Teles. Before you go, how's the channel going in the blues? It's you've been around for a long time. You got a lot of respect in the YouTube world.
It's been going a long time. I think it's still growing. Every month it's in the positive figures. It keeps hitting about between 1 million and 1.3 million views a month, which is amazing for
unreal.
A channel that I do everything myself pretty much apart from the live stream. So I'm pretty happy it's had the longevity. I think it's every now and then I try to mix things up, and I was doing too many of one type of videos for a while. I'll switch it up and do something else for a while. So yeah, it's all about trying to keep it interesting for the viewers and keep it growing and changing, and then revisiting old stuff just to keep, the original people around still. So yeah, I love it. I love what I do. I wake up and I know exactly what I want to get done. and today was no exception. I woke up, I went, all right, I got to get this done today. This video I'm working on of something I really like, and yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun process, not to sort of be held accountable by any company or anything like that. I'm completely doing my own thing, and it's cool. I'm in a fortunate position with what I do, and I work hard at it. I work really hard at it, and I think people think YouTube stuff is easy, but I work way harder now than I ever did at an IT job. Sure. and I worked at a really decent company too, and yeah, I just put a lot of time and effort into it. It's always something that, you know, I'm thinking about, what can I do next? And the lockdown's been challenging, I got to say, but surprisingly though, the numbers haven't really wavered, which has been fantastic. So I can't really borrow the same amount of stuff I'd usually borrow to film, but yeah, I've kept it moving, and things are going well, and hopefully it continues to do so.
Brian Wampler, welcome back to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Oh, great to have you back. Now, Brian, I know, my listeners know, you are a world famous pedal designer, builder guy. But today we're talking about a related but slightly different passion of yours, which is the Telecaster.
Yes, I love my Telecasters. I think I posted a picture, maybe on Instagram or something the other day, of just of all my Telecasters set out. And I was like, I think I either have a problem or maybe it's not a problem. I guess there's worse habits to have.
It's definitely worse. It's a good habit, man. It's a good habit. It's all good. I saw that post. I think I counted 8. Does that sound like the right number?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I reckon that's the right amount of tellies.
It's a good place to start. Now it's not done yet. I'm still collecting and accumulating. So
yeah. It's not John 5 level yet.
Right. I'm not John 5 level, but that's something to strive for.
Yes.
I'm working towards that.
Yeah, he's the guy for us. When did you first become aware of what a Telecaster was?
You know, my first Telecaster was actually what I would call my first quote unquote good guitar.
Okay. Yep.
And what I mean by that is, as a kid, I had, there was a company called Series 10 here in the States that I don't know how big they were outside of America. They were, I guess, beginner to maybe going to intermediate level. Mm-hmm. Not a great brand, but it was okay.
I remember the ads. I remember the ads in Guitar Player. We never saw them in Australia, but I did see ads for them.
Okay, so you're familiar with it anyway.
Yeah.
So it was okay. Nothing great. Honestly, I would take a Squire off the shelf today over that. And not knocking Series 10 necessarily, just that even the cheapest of cheap guitars are so much better than they were back in the 80s.
I know. It's crazy.
But my first good guitar was a Mexican. No, it was a made in Japan 52 reissue Telecaster.
Oh, nice.
And it's if you're looking at that Instagram picture that's on there, it is the Sunburst one that's got a hip shot bender on it now.
Rocking.
Yeah, so that was my first one in the mid 90s. And once I got that I bought that actually because I was joining a country band. I hadn't played country ever before.
Okay.
And that was just that was the gig that I was offered. I thought, I guess, I mean, it's all kind of pentatonic scales anyways. I'll figure it out. And then I learned that there's a guy named Brent Mason who plays that stuff. So I had to practice my butt off trying to play it. But that's really what started it, man, is getting that country band and buying that Telecaster. And from there, I bought my first tube amp right along with that Telecaster, which was a PV Delta Blues.
Okay, cool.
And
cool.
Yeah, that started. Well, it didn't really start my obsession, but that was when, I was just. I guess I was just out of school, and I was, had a job, and I'm like, all right, now I can start buying some guitar gear.
Yeah, nice. That's an important time. It's man to
Right.
first Tele,
Yeah.
first
So
tube amp.
ever since
Awesome.
then, it's been all downhill. I just kept buying stuff, and then started building stuff, and then
Yeah,
next thing you know, people were buying stuff off me.
it's a beautiful circle you got there.
Yeah, it is, man. It's one of those passions that just turned into a business kind of accidentally, and so every day is kind of like going to just going to hang out and going to play.
That's so good, man. Such a good story. And yeah, I'll for people listening today, I should let them know. I'll put the link to our interview, which we did a couple of years ago, talking pretty in depth about your career and about Wampler pedals. So people should definitely check that episode out if they've not heard it yet. Now, tell me about the other 7 Teles. Can you give me a quick rundown of what else you've got?
Yeah, let me look at them real quick because I actually forget. I'll know I'll skip over one. Okay, so this is a newer one I got at Winter NAMM this year in 2020, and it is I don't know what they call it, but it's got 2 different humbuckers in it,
Okay.
and it's kind of a bluish looking one if you're looking at the picture, and it's pretty meaty. It's a pretty great rock. I would call it more like a rock guitar. It's just freaking. It's got beef to it like crazy.
Nice.
So that's cool for what it is. I use it if I'm looking for something that's just a beefier type of sound. I usually use that or my other, what I would call a Les Telecaster, which is made by Whitfield Guitars,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a wine red, two humbuckers in it. Of course, it's the scale of a Les Paul.
Okay.
Same sort of wood and top and everything like you would have on a Les Paul, but shaped like a Tele. I guess the profile is more like a Les Paul, but the headstock itself is like a Telecaster. And it's honestly, it's like the best Les Paul I've ever played, but technically it's a Telecaster.
Okay.
So those are my 2, just beefy, punch you in the face type of guitars. I have another Whitfield. It's a butterscotch Whitfield that I'm actually looking for a new pick guard for this guy. I'm thinking of a black pick guard with some paisley on it, just kind of in honor of Brad Paisley, one of my guitar heroes.
Yeah.
So that's my butterscotch one. I think it's completely stock, with the exception I've swapped some pickups up a few times. I think I have Von Scout pickups in it right now.
Okay. Cool.
He makes some great pickups, by the way. And then we go to this is a Mexican Fender I bought off of, I think they're called Warford Benders now. It used to be, I think, B&G. Sadly, the owner passed away, and his son runs it now. It still does benders, but I bought the guitar with the G bender in it from him, and that's where I started kind of learning a lot of G bender type licks, obviously, because I'd always wanted one, didn't have one. So my birthday in maybe 2010 or 11, I bought that, and love it. It's a great guitar.
Nice.
And that's completely stock except for the bender. And then, of course, my made in Japan 52 reissue, which has the hip shot in it. Got a Seymour Duncan in a bridge and a Seymour Duncan. I don't remember which model, sorry. But I know I got 2 Seymour Duncans for pickups in it. And other than that, it's stock. It's been beaten up quite a bit and dropped more times than I care to admit. But it's still a great sounding Tele. And then I picked up the year before, so 2019 NAMM. I think it was then. I got a Friedman Telecaster, or I guess technically I should say T style, but I use Telecaster kind of generically like Kleenex.
Yeah. Gotcha. Absolutely.
And this one has a B bender in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super light. It's got a chunky neck. It's kind of like an unfinished neck, which I actually prefer. I don't like a really heavily lacquered neck. And it's a little bit tone wise, it's got a little bit more treble to it. And I mean, sometimes that's a cool thing. Sometimes I want a little bit beefier, but it definitely does have a unique Telecaster sound that works great for, at least for the stuff I do, which is really twangy type of guitar licks with that guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the B bender, it's straight up chicken picking.
Can you remind me, for the B bender, is the bender on the front strap horn or the back one?
Back one.
The back one. And so on the G bender,
Yep.
it's on the front.
On the no, they're both on the right off the neck plate.
Oh, okay, okay. What if you've got
no,
both?
Actually, I'm wrong. On the G bender from Warford, it's on the horn that's, yeah, well, I guess it would be the front horn. So it's by the topmost horn, I guess you could say.
Right.
So it's right on that. With this bender, this is a Glazer bender, by the way. It's on the neck plate itself. So the strap actually attaches in a little bit different place, but it doesn't feel awkward in any way. It actually feels really natural. So
Nice.
that's they both kind of work differently. They're both two different types of benders, both in what string they're bending, but also in how they're bending. But they work great. And then I have a Valley Arts, a Britt Mason model. I don't know how many they made. They didn't make too many of them, but for a while, Valley Arts.
Yeah.
I think they were owned by Gibson, maybe.
I think they are
But they
now.
made-
Yeah, they've had a really interesting history, haven't they?
Yeah, and they made a Brent Mason model for a while, and kind of a funny story with that. He had a prototype that he let me borrow at NAMM one year, and I loved it. Fell in love with it, and cried my eyes out when he wanted it back. So I ended up going on eBay and just buying one, and it's a weird one. I've played Brent's regular gray Telecaster.
Yeah.
And I would honestly say that sounds more like my 52 than the Valley Arts does.
Okay.
The Valley Arts kind of it's darker, it's heavy as a mug, and it kind of reminds me of a cross between kind of a Gibson-y sort of thing along with the Telecaster.
Okay.
So it's cool, but it's not really a really traditional Telecaster sound in that.
Interesting.
So, but it's it's a good piece to have, and it's Britt Mason being one of my guitar idols.
Yeah.
I like to keep it around and pull it out every now and then. More often than not, though, the main Telecaster I use is a Whitfield. It's that white one. If you've seen my videos,
Yeah.
I play it a
Yep.
big part of the time.
That's the one I most
And,
associate with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite, I would say. And it's got a chunky neck on it that's pretty much unfinished. Well, it looks unfinished. It's been weathered artificially, I guess you could say, worn down artificially. So a bit of relic going on with it. And pickups are stock from Whitfield. It's super light, just like my other Whitfields. They're all super light. And it's just got the best Telecaster tone I've ever heard. I mean,
That's cool.
It's ridiculous. Everyone that picks it up, I've probably sold him just dozens of guitars, because everyone that picks it up is like, oh my gosh, this is great. And it's
That's so good, man.
that's probably that's my baby.
Okay.
So that's the one I don't like to take it to NAMM just because I don't want it to get broken on the airplane or something like that.
Sure. Yep.
So
Very cool.
and that's it, I think. Yeah, I think that's the only Telecasters I have.
That's a good start, as you said. Now, I mean, you and I, we're a certain age, we're mature. We know it's not wise to say the guitar collection's finished, because it never is. What would your next Tele be if, without any restrictions? What would be, if something came across your path, what would you have to grab?
Well, I've thought about that. Someone pointed out that I don't have a thin line. That's correct. I don't have a thin line.
Okay, yeah.
So I need a thin line, and I also need something with P90s as well. I don't have anything with P90s.
Okay.
So I would say to totally upfront, I would buy another Whitfield,
Hmm.
and I struggle with this part. I love the Glazer B bender. I like a G better than a B though, as far as benders go.
Okay.
I like the kind of licks you can do with it better.
Hmm.
The problem that I'm so worried about and why I don't have any benders on my Whitfields is I'm so afraid it's going to change the sound of them, and
Sure. Yeah.
I don't want to take that chance. It's an expensive guitar. It's if you don't know Charles Whitfield, he's not like what a lot of luthiers do, which is they may get a neck from Stu Mac or some company that sells necks and a body, and they'll kind of put everything together and they paint it and put their own pickups and stuff. This guy actually starts out with chunks of wood, and like he goes to great lengths to find special chunks of wood,
Yeah. Right.
and he cuts them and he carves them, and everything is completely done by hand. It's just it's a whole nother level.
Wow.
So every spec that you could possibly want, he can do for you. And I sound like I'm an advertisement for Charles Whitfield. The only reason I say that is because I love him so much, and that would be the next guitar I would buy.
Yeah, cool. That's a good recommendation. You've mentioned Brad Paisley and Brent Mason, and apart from being your heroes, you ended up collaborating with them to have some Wampler pedals. That must be pretty cool. Again, full circle kind of story for you.
It is, yeah. But both of them are two odd stories. So with Brent Mason, I was I was telling you about being in a country band.
Yes, yep.
Had never really played anything like that. This is back in the 90s when country wasn't basically a mixture of pop and hip hop. So there was actual country guitar going on, right?
Yep.
And so I was trying to learn this stuff, and I was just completely flustered because my hair metal licks weren't cutting it. I was coming from the world of I was into, when I was younger, I was like into Rat and of course Van Halen and all that kind of stuff, just
course.
more hair metal based. And then I went through my Nirvana and Pearl Jam phase and Soundgarden. I got really into a lot of bands like that, and I still like those bands. But when I joined that country band, that's when I had to learn these licks. And that led me to figuring out it was Brent Mason on a lot of stuff, and Dan Huff and a few other guys. But a big part of what I was drawn to was Brent Mason stuff on like Alan Jackson and Brooks and Dunn. And I ended up being such a stupid fan, stupid in meaning not like idiotic, though some could argue that that's true as well. Such a massive fan that I named my son after Brent Mason.
Wow.
Before knowing Brent Mason. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
Then when I met Brent and I had mentioned that I actually named my son after him, he was like, "Whoa, that's kind of weird."
Sure.
Like, yeah, I'm a bit of a fan. So yeah, that was cool. I basically I made some pedals for him, found out where he was playing in Nashville. I went down and gave it to him, and he liked them. And that's what started that relationship.
Nice.
With Paisley, totally different. I don't have a kid named Paisley, though I tried.
Yeah, it's documented. Yes.
my wife shut me down. She
Fair
said,
enough.
"No more kids named after guitar players." But with Brad Paisley, I had made a pedal. No, I'm taking it back. I modified a pedal. It's a Boss OD3, and when he was smaller. Not in size, but in draw.
Yes.
He was just getting started. I went to a local place he was playing, and in the middle of the concert, at this venue, they would allow people to walk up to the stage, walk down the center aisle. You could take a picture, then you have to go sit down. Well, I'm in this line where everyone's taking pictures. I get up to the stage, and I kind of toss a pedal on, like, right next to his feet. He looks at me like I've got three eyes, and looks down at the pedal, looks over at his tech, and kind of motions his head to get it off the stage. So and that guitar tech was Zach Childs. I don't know if you know Zach Childs or not, but he's got a YouTube channel. He works for, I think he works for True Tone, used to be Visual Sound.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, so that was Brad Paisley's tech at the time, and Zach was on a forum called the TDPRI, Telecaster Discussion page, and I found out who he was on that page and sent him a message and said, "Hey, I'm the crazy guy that threw a pedal at Brad when you guys were here in Indiana," and so that kind of started that relationship.
That's awesome.
You know, just it got my name in front of them, so now they're like, you know, he's the guy that once threw a pedal at Brad.
And it worked out, man. It worked out because the Paisley drive rules. I know players and lots of styles who love that pedal. So, well done.
Well, thank you.
That's great, Brian. Thank you so much for talking Telecasters, Tele players you've thrown pedals at. It's a great Tele love affair you've got. So that's why I wanted to get you back.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode packed with Telecaster love. It's been good times. My thanks to Zane, Shane, and Brian for joining me today. Please check out our show notes for links to my interviews with Zane and Brian. Also links to Shane's YouTube channel and some other cool stuff there. Thanks for joining me. My name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.